job really was, what he did. And I'll read you some of this. Well, the old QM, my friend Baxter, is responsible for making sure the battalion's main store is filled with all the materials needed when we're in or out of the line. Thank heavens Baxter does 80% of the paperwork. This being the army, there's no shortage of that. I've located the transport with my 50 men and 60 animals a few miles, usually less than 3, behind the lines, but the Hun knows that and often makes us a target of bombing, shelling and gassing too. Curse him. Each night we set out when it's quite dark, after 9 p.m, but often much later. My groom has saddled and prepared Doris too for me, while my transport sergeant has lined up our limbers and the carts ready for my inspection of the ration party, as we call it. It's not a party, really. Of course, there's always a real hate going on, with shells whooshing over us and landing all around, and the sound of machine guns chattering from up at the front. Often the beastly Boche have their 5.9s targeted on certain roadways, and especially crossroads, which makes the trip up to the line very interesting. The next slide shows actually that was Hellfire Corner. They had to dash through Hellfire Corner to get the rations up to the line. And the next slide is about was a cutting from the Bystander magazine, and actually this guy is meant to be the transport officer, though I think my grandfather was a bit thinner, not so portly. This is the quartermaster Baxter, who probably was quite portly, and there are the horse lines, and these are the mules and the limbers, and that was done with cutting out black paper. It's a very famous artist did that. He takes the wagons very slowly. They're heavily loaded, but when we pass through a hot location like Windy Crossroads, Hellbar's Corner and such like, we rush through at a gallop with spaces between each dash of a limber so as to dodge the shells and bullets as best we can. The muster men are waiting from each company to collect their rations and their supplies. I most often then walk to the trenches and chat with my pals, the company officers in the line, in their primitive dugouts. I feel my job is to cheer up the fellows up there, especially those about to go on a raid. The men are tired, but always glad to see us with the hot food, the rum jars, tobacco, and sometimes the comfort of extra blankets that QM Baxter has procured from somewhere. It is strange to think that there is some fellow of a Hun transport officer doing the same job as me, bringing beer and pumpernickel to the Boche troops just a few yards away. He's still a swine. Well, he says, I'm getting tired, I must finish the letter. I am often a kind of lawyer for my men on charges, scrounger of animals and fodder, and banker for the officers and men, especially when it's payday and loans are brought in. I'm a horse provider to the officers and accounts officer to the battalion, and often to the brigade as well. I'm sports day organiser for the battalion, and more recently I've become the mess president. That means plenty of paperwork and form filling, in addition to the nightly run up to the trenches. It is not a soft or cushy job, but generally I'm pleased to be still working with animals, like I did when I was in the yeomanry. I think, by the way, I enclosed part of a poem, which you won't be able to read on the slide, but I'll read it to you. This is from the famous magazine called Wipers Times. He cut this out and sent it back to his future father-in-law. It said, I don't think so in French, but sing the joys of a transport man who drives along with a gay hello, cricking his whip as only he can, a smile and a joke as away they go. His cap is jauntily placed on his head, his clothes show the care of an old-time beau. He hums the tune that his mule's hooves tread, his voice runs in dulcet tones and low, driving along on the smooth, hard roads with never a jolt and never an oath, till at Hellfire Corner he drops his loads and fondles his mules, for he loves them both. Then homeward he wends his weary way to the rose-decked villa where he may sleep, till night shall again give place to day, and the angels above him keep their keep. And he said, George Anaheim said, I don't think so. And he called that poem Ironic Pentameter because of the rhyming. So the next chapter I just thought I brought to show you is 2 chapters in one. His love for his men and his four-legged friends. He called them his men from Erin's Isle. And he wrote a lot about his men, and like his men, he loved the animals that they had, because their life as a transport section was quite lonely. They were behind the lines, they were between the battalion HQ, which is about 10 miles back, and the trenches. He was about 3 miles back from the trenches. It's often quite lonely. He describes his life as quite lonely. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the men. I believe they're muster men. It's difficult to see in this picture, with some of the members all lined up there. And he wrote to his mother and father about all this, and he said, it's an awful war, but we're giving the Boche a real bucket full of stuff every night, and we will soon have them running home to the old Kaiser. The division's exploit at Ginchy showed what we can really do. I got a personal commendation from the General, but alas, no mention in dispatches or medal came my way. Never mind, my job is safe, don't worry. Of course I'm working 20 hours a day, but I have 60 men and 70 animals to do the heavy work. These Irishmen are splendid men, and the Colonel is very pleased with my transport lines. The Brigadier and the General came on a visit, and I was seen as a paragon of all that is good. One of my men, poor fellow, got kicked in the head by a mule and had a few teeth knocked out. I took him to the hospital, and I think he's getting on well now, at least I hope so. To get the best out of them, I'm quite sympathetic to their conditions and needs. Remember, I was a private myself only a couple of years ago. It seems like decades ago. I've never told them that, of course. Putting their food and comfort before my own means they are loyal and protective of me. They see how I love the animals. We now have Jenny, a pet goat, a dog, Fritz, as he came across from the Hun lines, and a wee kitten. Kitten lives with me, and the goat stays with the men. But he did upset old Baxter, the QM, when he ate a lot of his papers. The dear old QM had to rewrite many pages of army bump. Both my servant John and my groom Dan keep me well informed on the mood of the men and any issues to solve. You see, they do rather like fighting amongst themselves when idle, and especially when the rum ration is allocated, so we do have times of indiscipline. Boy, can they drink. At the same time, when given the chance, they are some of the bravest men at the front. Even the Hun knows that. When there is an Irish regiment in the line, the Boche go especially quiet with their bombs and shelling. These men are from the south, Cork, Limerick, Kerry and County Clare, but we have a few Ulstermen, English and Scots in the section as well. The humour of these men from Ireland really keeps me smiling inside, and their patriotic songs and pipe music stirs the heart. There are some lovely tunes. Luckily the politics stay in Ireland. There are absolutely no issues here, even though the Boschmen shout across the line about the goings on in Ireland. You must have read about the raid by the 2nd Battalion across to the Boche trenches to capture their offensive sign about English soldiers killing your wives and children. The men left a green flag with harp in its place and another sign with rude remarks about the Kaiser. That captured Hun sign will be a trophy for this war, I'm sure. By the way, that trophy, that actual Hun sign, is in the Imperial War Museum in London. I've seen it. It's quite moving. Now, the next slide is actually a little bit of footage that I found. Can we do it in the next slide? Here we go. The Royal Master's going to Mass. So you will look at that, Irene. Yesterday was church parade. The men need it. You know how much I detest it. The men need their blessings and absolutions as often as they can. Going to bed at 3 a.m. and then waking up at 4 a.m. to inspect the men before setting off on an 8-mile march to the nearest church is not my idea of heaven. Actually, yesterday, as we marched in the morning light, and to be fair, it was a glorious day, we were filmed by a movie cameraman beside the road. I ordered my men to look tall and smart as they marched by. I would love to see the resulting film at a picture house one day. You might see your hubby on the newsreels, marching proudly at the front of his men, walking stick swinging and with a certain swagger. That's the first Munsters for you. And that would be also one for the archives in 100 years' time, if film material lasts that long. Lots of my merry men are going on leave. I couldn't stop a man's leave, even though I end up doing the work myself. My men are jovial and then fierce, soft with the animals, but not afraid to steal a pig or some hens from a local farm to add to the rations. I always ask if they got it honestly, knowing full well they didn't. I get a funny reply, "Oh, sorry, it was indeed already asking for the pot." They offered me a hare the other day, but I let them cook it for themselves. I can say I'm very proud of my men and the battalion and this regiment and all the men of Munster. We seem to jog along well together. Then the next slide is a letter from, he sent back to his wife, this letter written with a quill pen by the looks of it, saying, not very good punctuation, but a really nice letter. "Dear sir, would you let me know anything about my husband, Private David Condon, number 49781, 1st Battalion, Royal Munster Fusiliers, Y Company, Transport Section, British Expeditionary Force, France, as I did not hear from him since November, as I wrote in 3 letters, got no reply as yet. He seems to have forgotten all about his wife and little children, as he has got a good wife, a better wife than he is a husband, and a wife who is never deserving of him. There's nothing wrong with him. He deserves a good showing up. I know he's not able to write, but that is no excuse. Any man in his battalion would do so for him. This is my 2nd time writing to you about him. I'm sorry for troubling you so much. Would you kindly let me know anything about him, as I'll be glad to know. He seems to forget all about them at home. It is a long time to be waiting for a letter since November. He deserves a good showing up. Would you please oblige? Mary Condon, 101 Great William O'Brien Street, Blackpool, Cork." My letter tells Doris what action I am taking. Well, we've been moving about all day. I love the letter you sent me. The only letter I got today was the one from the wife of one of my men telling me he hasn't written since last November and he's taken to drink. He, poor fellow, cannot write, even his name. And I don't know how she expects him to write to her a letter. Anyway, I'll have to write to her to make peace. I've just sent for her husband and I will lecture him. I can appreciate her feelings, being a married man myself. Don't be jealous, little girl, if I write to her and tell her that her husband is fit and well. He's really quite a good man. I've never seen him drunk and never had to scold him before. So, Bubby also, as well as admiring his men, was a horseman, ex-cavalry. He was a polo player, jumper, a racer. But as the war progresses, he realizes that hooves are being replaced by wheel vehicles. And writing to Doris, he says, "My darling little sweetheart, wife-to-be, this is the first chance I've had of writing. I must admit to feeling half dead and nearly asleep. I nearly came home to you this evening, but not of my own design, but that of some foul Hun machine gunner. I am and have been in a nasty place, and unfortunately one of my horses is a casualty tonight. He, poor fellow, saved me absolutely. I was walking on the offside of him, and a bullet caught him in his stifle, which corresponds to our thigh. If he hadn't been there at all, it would have caught me in the shoulder or neck. So cheerio. So far I'm quite well, and thanking to my good luck and my four-legged friend for keeping me safe. But it is sad to see the death and wounds of such fine animals." Doris, too, is the name of his favourite riding mount,